Hi, I'm Ken Rockwell. Let's take a look at Nikon's newest 50mm f1.2 lens for their Z series of mirrorless cameras. But most importantly, let's first take a look at some of the pictures we can take, and I'm going to show you just how sharp this insanely sharp lens is. Here's my bicycle. Now what I'm doing is zooming in with my video editing software to show you the far left side, where I'm going to show you the microscopic lettering on my tire, which I can barely read with my bare eyes. This is shot at f1.2 wide open at 1/8,000th of a second at ISO 64 with -7/10 of a stop exposure compensation. And the key is it's ultra sharp even out in the corners. Lenses are at their softest when they're wide open, and they're at their softest off in the corners. So if you look off in the corners wide open, that's the torture test for lens. It always gets sharper as you get closer to the center and as you stop it down. And the fact that it's ultra sharp even at f1.2 means you're getting your money's worth. In the olden days, Nikon's 58mm f1.2 Noct was nowhere near as sharp as this lens is. If we show the same bicycle now at f4 at 1/1250th at ISO 64 with -1 stop of exposure compensation, it's even a little bit sharper. And this I found is the sharpest aperture for things that are actually in focus. And remember, this bicycle is not flat. It's not a test target. It's a bicycle. It's a living, breathing, three-dimensional thing. You'll notice how you really can read the microscopic printing on my tire on the far edge of the picture. So this lens could not be any sharper. What's new is it's Nikon's first 50mm f1.2 autofocus lens ever. All the other f1.2 lenses from Nikon have been manual focus. Here's the 58mm Noct. This is a totally manual focus lens. Nikon has never made anything faster than f1.4 in autofocus. Notice that there is a huge difference in size. This sells for about $3,800 used today. More as a collectible. The optics of this lens are far superior. The Noct, original Noct that I just showed you here, this lens is never very sharp, even when stopped down. What it does well is it's always contrasty and always snappy, especially in the corners at f1.2, but especially on a digital camera today, if you're looking for pixel by pixel sharpness, this lens never had it. It was a very special design that kept the corners contrasty, which the spherical lenses, like the regular 50mm f1.2, couldn't do. This lens today does it all. It's autofocus, and it is ultra sharp, like something you'd put in a satellite. It's Nikon's first 50mm lens with a digital display, which I think is foolish. It's powered by the camera, which I don't have connected. To make it work, it's like one of those LED watches from the 1970s, which ultimately everybody got rid of because nobody wanted to have to push a button anytime they wanted to see it. The display turns off every few seconds, so always having to press this button makes it kind of stupid. And the only thing it tells you is maybe the aperture or the focus distance, and that's about it. I don't even think I could get it to show me the depth of field as the 58mm f0.95 Noct will do. So it's more of a gimmick. So there. What's good is it's a fast lens. It's f1.2. It's ultra sharp. It has no visible or measurable distortion, which is superb. That also means you can turn off distortion correction. You're not going to get any distortion. And then you don't have to even worry about any sort of sub-pixel resampling that would be going on with the distortion correction activated. So it might be even a little sharper that way technically. It's got a programmable lens function button, which you program in your camera. If you don't go out of your way to program it, it'll be a focus lock button. Nikon claims dirt, dust, and moisture resistance. It is full-time manual focus override, which is one of the advantages of Nikon Z system, that anytime you grab this ring when the camera's actually awake, it doesn't even have to be metering, just awake. If you're looking through the camera, anytime you turn this ring, the lens follows suit. The bad thing is, because it's an electronic focus lens, it never is real time. It's always delayed by a fraction of a second, which might seem like fun if you're just playing with a friend's lens, you know, it focuses in, focuses out. But if you're actually trying to shoot, if you're actually shooting at f1.2 magnified and trying to set ultra precise focus, because you have to wait a fraction of a second for it to catch up, you can't just go like this and dial a focus in. You have to go a little bit, wait, a little bit more, wait in each direction. So it's actually a pain because it is electronic with a slight delay, which is very typical for all mirrorless cameras of all brands. What's bad is, but also good, is Nikon claims it comes with a case, but it's not a case. Look at this thing. It's a sack. It's just a cloth sack. It's not even padded. A sock works better. This is not a case, but Nikon claims it's a case, so call it what you want. It also comes with a great hood. It's a plastic hood made in Thailand, but it does have a locking pawl. So when you attach this little guy here, it's not coming off. I know I'm always checking my other bayonet hoods that they don't accidentally come off because they just have a little friction click. Nah, this thing locks. It's not coming off until you press this release button, and then you can take it off. And it's also a fairly deep hood, and because it's not a zoom lens, this is optimized for the lens's focal length on full frame. So it's going to do a pretty good job. Not that this lens has any problem with flare, but old-timers still remember the 1940s before lenses were coated and you actually needed a hood. What's bad about this lens? Well, it's laughably large. This beast weighs about 2 pounds. It costs over $2,000. And it honestly doesn't do anything different at all than the 50mm f1.8 if you're shooting at f1.8 or smaller. So if you don't actually need f1.2, you don't want this lens. The filter threads are plastic. The exterior is mostly plastic. There's this trim ring here, which is metal, but it's mostly plastic. It's also been offshored to Thailand. Nikon dumped production overseas. It's not made domestically in Japan, and to be perfectly honest, nobody pays me anything to do these videos, so I can say it. I've been a Nikon customer since the 80s. I'm not going to buy this lens because, honestly, I'm not paying over $2,000 for something that's not made in Japan. So call me a stickler, but that's why I'd rather shoot Canon. What is it missing? It's not really missing anything other than a real case, but it does have no image stabilization, which is typical, as ultra-speed lenses like this usually don't have image stabilization. But it will work just fine with whatever built-in stabilization your camera may or may not have. If we look specifically for performance, honestly, this is an optically flawless lens. It's got no distortion, it's ultra sharp, it does everything well. Autofocus is a little on the slow side because autofocus had to be slowed down enough so that you could get ultra precise, perfect focus at f1.2. So it's designed more for precision than for speed. Also, what's weird is the autofocus actually makes a little bit of noise. It's like I thought that went away with AFS silent motor lenses in the 1990s, but it is a little bit of motor whirring as it's focusing in and out. Strange but true. Focus breathing, which is the image chasing size as focus from near to far, it doesn't have anything significant. In the lab, the image gets a little bit larger as focused more closely, but no one's ever going to see that if you're using this for shooting movies and focusing between different actors. For bokeh, the bokeh is neutral, meaning that blur circles of a point source that are out of focus are just going to be round circles. They're not going to be anything particularly odd. I'm zooming in here with my video editing software on still images on my pet plastic owl so you can see the details on your mobile device or whatever you're watching this on. This is in true 4K, so I hope you're watching on a giant 85-inch monitor in true 4K, in which point these things look awesome. But in any case, that's what these are. Of course, at f1.2, the background's almost gone, and as we stop down, it gets sharper and sharper in the background. The background becomes less and less out of focus. Remember, bokeh is not a measure of how far out of focus it is. It's a measure of the quality of out of focusness. If you'd like to download the original files for these straight out of the camera, if you go to my website, kenrockwell.com, which is ultimately the best source of information on all this stuff, as these videos are just summaries, you can download the files. And I have the link to the files and my full written review in the description of this video. For ergonomics, I've covered most of it, but I will say that this little third ring in the back is kind of a bummer because normally it's programmed to change your aperture, but it works poorly because it has no click stops. So if you're trying to set shutter speed or aperture or compensation instead of clicking, which is important because the Nikon cameras still don't all have, I forget, read the reviews for different cameras, they don't have real-time updates in the Finder usually. So you're turning this and waiting, turning this and waiting. At least if you could click it, some of the Nikons, you can click it. Like click it 3 clicks, you know it's going to change by a stop. That's not the case. There's no clicks. It also runs fairly quickly, so it's a fairly pointless control because just a little bit of motion will change the aperture by a lot. So it's annoying. I just use the front dial on my camera, which does have clicks to set my aperture. And sadly, because this thing is easy to knock the way I hold the lens, it'll start changing things by itself, which is not good. I usually deactivate this third ring, which is sad but true. Fall off? This lens has very little fall off. Historically, super speed lenses would be designed with deliberate mechanical vignetting to keep all the price down, but also let the designers get away with a little bit because with mechanical vignetting, you wouldn't see how much softer it would have gotten in the corners if it didn't have mechanical vignetting. And therefore, they usually had a lot of fall off. With this, these are shot with the vignette control at normal. There's no significant vignetting. Shoot it at f1.2, looks fine in actual pictures as opposed to shooting gray test charts. Now, of course, if you go out of your way to turn the correction off, you will see what the lens is actually doing. It does have some vignetting at f1.2, but it's not as much as older lenses used to do that were f1.2. At f1.4, it's still got a little bit, and it's effectively gone by f2, so that is actually excellent performance. For using filters, it is a plastic 82mm filter thread. What's nice is you can put quite a stack of 82mm filters on here. I don't even know how many because I would never put more than like 3, even if I was shooting film. So you don't have to worry about that. Use your regular polarizers, rotating grad filters, or whatever you want. There's no problem. I don't see any lateral color fringes. Nikon cameras correct for this automatically, especially if you're shooting JPEG. If you're shooting RAW, then opening those files in non-Nikon brand software to turn them into actual images, you might see some more lateral color. I don't know. I didn't try it. But this lens is so good, I really doubt that. There is some spherochromatism, which is a different artifact, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Lens corrections. Most of the Z cameras as of this production, which is July of 2021, correct for any of all distortion, diffraction, and or fall off, which is called vignette control, and you can turn all those on or off individually. Macro performance. It doesn't get that close, but boy, is it sharp. Here again, this is a still shot at f1.2 at ISO 64 on a Z7 Mark II, and I'm zooming in so you can see detail. What impresses me, because I do this a lot, is even shot at the absurd aperture of 1.2, where you would never want to shoot macro because you would get absolutely nothing in focus. It's pretty darn sharp. Most other lenses have problems with spherical aberration at close distances, which they don't have at the far distances. The fact that this is still sharp and contrasty is exceptionally good performance. Of course, we stop it down to f8, then everything's in focus. And as we zoom in, you can start seeing the dirt on the watch crystal and so forth, which wasn't even in focus before. The depth of field is so shallow at f1.2 that only the watch face surface was in focus, none of the hands were in focus. So this is superb performance. Mechanically, it's mostly plastic. It's offshore to Thailand. This is not an heirloom grade lens. I wouldn't buy this thinking you're going to give it to your grandkids like a Leica lens. It's a lens to shoot and then dispose of in a few years. Sorry, but true. The finish is mostly black plastic. The hood's plastic. There's no front bumper if you bang this into something. Filter threads are plastic. The hood bayonet mount is plastic. The front barrel here is plastic. The focus ring is rubber-covered metal. That's nice. The slide switch here for auto manual focus is plastic. This section here, this is plastic. The OLED window is plastic. It's not crystal. The rear control ring is metal. And this trim ring here on the back, right here, that's metal. There's no tripod collar. The identity is engraved on this piece of plastic on the front. The internals could be metal. They probably are, but I haven't taken the lens apart, so good luck. There's a dust gasket on the mount. The mount is chromed metal. It's not aluminum. The serial number is laser engraved on the bottom of the barrel. Doesn't sound right, but that's the truth. Bottom of the barrel, right there like that. Quality-wise, it's made in Thailand. Sorry about that, but I didn't set that. Spherochromatism is where things that aren't in perfect focus may have color fringes around them. In this case, things that are a little bit out of focus in the background take on a little bit of a green or cyan tinge, and things a little bit out of focus in the foreground take on a little bit of a magenta or reddish fringe. Again, I'm zooming in here on this shot, made it f1.2 at the close focus distance, which is really exaggerating this effect, and this is what you get. This actually isn't a bad thing, because if you're shooting portraits and the backgrounds are out of focus and it's green, as it often is, it actually will help smooth it, so that's good. Let's look at sun, stars, and flare. This lens is great. The vertical smear you see here is an artifact of the Nikon Z7 II interline transfer smear. And as I stop down, the vertical smear goes away, which again is a camera artifact. And stopping down more gives me 18 pointed sun stars from its 9-bladed diaphragm. Now, the red and green dots you see at smaller apertures, that's another artifact of all the wells in the camera's sensor. The only real flare I see is one purplish dot in the middle of the image. That's extraordinarily good. Most of the time, these multi-element, super complex lenses, you'll see all kinds of flare. But no, Nikon has controlled it, and that is awesome. Let's compare it. If we compare it to the eye of God, the Nikon Z 58mm f0.95 Noct, honestly, they're both equally as sharp. I've shot them at the range. I've shot them in the lab directly against each other. They're as sharp. The Noct is maybe a half stop faster. The Noct is a special purpose lens. It's not a general purpose handheld lens. It's manual focus only, and so the choice is clear. If you're an organization or someone creating work that's going to be valuable for 100 years from now and want it to be absolutely flawless, and you're working on a tripod, and you're using manual focus, by all means, go for the Noct. If you're a regular person who actually has to work for a living, well, don't even buy this lens, buy the 51.8. But for everybody else, this lens is just as sharp, and it adds autofocus. So the eye of God is really for doing things like copying fine works of art, or if you're doing everything in a tripod and manually focusing in extremely high magnifications and needing to shoot everything at large apertures, which is really very limited use. Versus the 50mm f1.8, honestly, they are equally as sharp. The 51.8 is a great lens, and what most people would be far better off with is one stop of difference. So to be honest, if you want to carry this 2.5-pound lens, make sure you're using it at wider than f1.8, because otherwise you're getting no benefit whatsoever by shooting this giant lens. The f1.8 is just as sharp, and it's a heck of a lot smaller. Another practical idea is to use the good old-fashioned 50mm f1.8G AFS lens, which is this guy here, on the FTZ adapter, which works flawlessly on the Z series cameras. You'll get instant mechanical, direct mechanical manual focus, as well as instant manual focus override, the same auto and manual focus mode switch. This is a great little lens, weighs a lot less, it costs a lot less. This and the adapter, as of 2021, sell for about $500 total, so for a quarter of the price. And if you already own this adapter, this lens sells for about $350. Of course, it goes up and down, depending, honestly, people don't realize this, but here in America, it depends on the exchange rates between the yen and the dollar, which vary from month to month. The size difference is incredible. The weight difference is incredible. At normal apertures for normal picture taking, this lens is just as sharp and will take the same pictures. If you're going to shoot it wide open at f1.4, then look at test charts. This lens is certainly going to blow it out of the water. But if you're doing that, looking at test charts, your pictures are going to be boring anyway. No great photographs were ever made in the laboratory. If you want to compare it to Canon's 50mm f1.2L USM, both of these lenses have extraordinarily high optical quality. They're both equally good. The real question is that the Canon lens only works on the Canon series of mirrorless cameras. It can't be adapted to any other brand of camera. So whatever brand of camera you have, that's the lens you get. It doesn't matter if you want to compare them. Also, the Canon lens is quality made domestically in Japan, while Nikon dumped this beast for about the same price off to, Thailand, which again, Thailand's an awesome place, but it's not Japan where this lens is designed. So call me snotty. I buy American products because I live in America, and if I'm going to buy a Japanese branded product, I want it to be made in Japan, not offshore to save the manufacturer money. Here's another funny comparison. If we compare Canon's RF7200 f2.8 LIS USM, this Canon lens actually weighs a little bit less, and it's just a little bit shorter than this Nikon 51.2. So this is a beast. So what do I recommend? If you deserve the best, you want to buy this lens, don't let me dissuade you from getting it. You're going to love it because the optics make it worthwhile. But the optics of the 51.8 Z lens are just as good. This lens is for the guy who needs to have the best, doesn't mind owning the best, and really appreciates the finest gear. But on the other hand, if you're that guy, man up and get the Z 58mm f0.95 Noct, the eye of God, and really be the king. The only other suggestion is I always use an 82mm filter, a UV filter on the front, and I have links to those in my actual review. The beauty of that is I never have to waste my time with the cap. I always shoot through the filter. I throw it in my bag with just the filter on it. I don't have to worry about the filter getting damaged. If it does, I throw the filter away, put a new one on, and guess what? In decades of shooting, I've never damaged the filter by throwing it in a bag without a cap on it. And this way, the lens is always ready to shoot. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching this at kenrockwell.com and kenrockwell.tv, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.